What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Rizzology. This is definitely not an easy episode or the way that I intended to end the 2025 year leading into 2026. However, sometimes life throws curveballs and you need to adapt and continue pushing on and moving forward. And that is the name of the game when it comes to life as a whole. It's adaptability, it's learning the game of life, and it's about becoming resilient as life continually challenges you and puts things in front of you that not only test your character, but test how well you've learned past and previous experiences. Excuse me. This isn't an easy episode for me to do. I may seem a little bit more nervous in front of the camera than I've been in years past. But for those that know, Kenji's passing has definitely hit me hard. And I was trying hard not to tear up right out the gate. But it hasn't been easy. And I miss him. For those that would know normally, his face might be here. He might be laying on the ground over there. But this episode is in remembrance of him. And it's we didn't have an easy journey, let's just say that. And I have a lot of things to kind of talk about, so I apologize if I'm crying in everybody's speakers, but I'm probably going to cry a few more times. I have a general outline of what I want to speak about in terms of what led me to Kenji, what led me to Amber, his breeder in Minnesota, who is a phenomenal human being. I couldn't be more blessed to have her as his breeder. And kind of what happened as Kenji and I started off on the path of life together when he was about 2 and he was faced with some health issues that definitely changed the landscape of what we were anticipating life to be like with one another. And I guess that's the name of the game. Sometimes you really just don't understand what you are going to be faced with in life. The challenges, just everything in general. You think that things are going to be picture perfect sometimes, and they're not. And that was kind of my relationship with Kenji. And it wasn't because our personal relationship wasn't perfect. It was. But there was a lot of stress. There was a lot of things that I was not mentally prepared going into it. But once again, in life, sometimes you have to forge ahead and be prepared. Just as somebody that has a sick child that takes care of them for their entire life or figures out how they're going to take care of this child and how they're going to provide the best life possible for this child, I had to do the same with Kenji and the things that we were presented with him. So let's start from the ground up before I got Kenji. I had a dog named Cookie. She was a Shiba Inu. She was an amazing dog, childhood dog. But being an only child in a divorced parent household, it was something that I had always wanted to have companionship and to have a dog. My parents, I split up the time between them, mostly with my mom, and I go see my dad every other weekend and stay over there. But I always did want a dog. I always wanted that companionship. I had a lot of friends when I grew up. I moved a couple of different times, so I always made friends in new areas. But there was just that wanting of man and dog companionship. I can't say it, I've said it like 3 times now, but it was the truth. I really did want a dog. So my parents got me Cookie, and she was a Shiba Inu. She was amazing. She was adorable. This is like early 2000s. And she was amazing. She was my first dog, first experience with a dog. Cookie lived to 12, and she just existed. I mean, she rarely had health problems, maybe a couple of UTIs. She did tear both of her ACLs, one, and then she tore the other one. I think it was like a couple of years later, like on the date that the doctor said she's going to tear her other ACL. We were like, no, she's not. And sure enough, she tore the other one. And other than that, I mean, she lived to 12. She did have cancer towards the end, and it was brutal. I mean, looking back on my experiences with Kenji now and being able to understand medically what was going on with Cookie, she was having seizures. We just didn't know that they were seizures at the time. And she basically, I'm trying to think about how to best say it. One day, essentially, I thought she jumped off the couch incorrectly. I thought she jumped off the couch, hurt her paw, and she was limping. But she wound up knuckling her paw, and it wound up kind of pointing downwards like that. And as it got progressively worse over the next probably about year, she wound up just kind of dragging that paw. And it became tough. I mean, you start to analyze and think, when is the best time to say goodbye? Am I doing the dog a disservice by trying to save myself from having to say goodbye while the dog is sick? These are all things that dog owners as a whole are going to have to go through and experience if you have the dog your entire life, or the entire dog's life, I should say. And it sucks. I mean, there's no way around it. When you have to say goodbye to a pet, it can sometimes be harder than saying goodbye to a loved one. I don't understand why, but it really does hit you like a 50 cal bullet just hitting you right in the chest. When you are there for the dog in their final moments, which you need to be, I know some people can't stomach it and they don't want to do it, but you really do have to sit there with the dog as they pass into that next realm. It's difficult for us, but we have to be there for this animal that we've had dominion over for X amount of years. And it's the final act of love in a lot of ways that you can give them when things just aren't going well for them anymore. I mean, there becomes a point where they continue to live for you, but are they living at the healthiest and most optimal for themselves? So although the dog is like happy to see you every time you come in the house, but the rest of the existence of the dog is dragging her paw, and you have to take her outside by picking her up and bringing her outside, and she can't walk and all these different things, that becomes challenging to sit there and say, well, the dog has a great quality of life, because she didn't. And now looking back, she was having a couple of seizures. She would have these, we call them episodes. She would have these little episodes where her head would kind of bob side to side, side to side. And looking back, we probably should have put her down a lot sooner. When we did put her down, finally, it was the summer of 2019. And we just woke up one morning and she was really in bad state. So we wound up calling Lap of Love, and they did the euthanasia at the house. And it was difficult to sit there and experience. It was very difficult to sit there and experience the dog's final breath, especially a dog that you've known for 12 years. But once again, when they're sick, you have to be able to make that decision for them. And I didn't want her suffering anymore. It was pretty bad. Now, saying goodbye to Cookie was tough. It was a challenge. And it hit my mom hard. It hit me hard. But because she was a childhood dog and she bounced around when I was away at college, and she bounced around to my dad and my mom and me when I was home, it's not that she didn't feel like my dog. It just felt like the bond wasn't the same as it was in relation now to Kenji. Now, being an only child, it gets lonely. I have no siblings, obviously. That's what an only child is. Just want to make sure everyone knows that. But it can be very lonely. At times it can be challenging, and you really do, if you're not dating somebody, or which I've been in and out of relationships, but mostly single, just out of my own, I want there to be something really special to be in a relationship type of scenario. Summer of 2019, I was feeling it again, because Cookie wasn't in the house. She wasn't there to greet you when you open the door and this and that. And probably after about 2 or 3 months, it was nice to not have to run home every 5 seconds to walk her and take care of her. But like I said, Cookie just existed. She kind of just was there. She wasn't like Kenji or other people's dogs where they go everywhere with them and this and that. She wanted one lap around the neighborhood, and that was it. That was all set for her, and she didn't want to do anything further. When that summer continued and it started going into fall, I really started to do some research. Now, this is before COVID, and we all know what happened in 2020. But I was on track at that point with my business to be able to afford my first apartment. I was in my late 20s. for my first apartment, really hit the ground running with certain clients that I was working with, and things really were on the up and up. So I said, you know what? I would love to get another dog. And I started looking at Rotties, Dobermans, Pit Bulls, all these different types of very dominant big breeds, because Cookie was about 25, 30 pounds. She was a little chunker. She should have been lighter. I decided that I wanted to get a dog. So now I'm doing all this research, and I see that there are Japanese Akitas and American Akitas, and I didn't really know what the difference was. I just knew that Japanese Akitas looked like XL versions of Cookie, so they look like giant Shiba Inus. And then I started doing the research on them, and American Akitas are a little larger and stockier, while the Japanese Akitas are a little leaner and more agile and whatnot. But they both come from the Spitz, obviously both Akitas, but they come from the Spitz breed of dogs, which are all those like pointed ear, curled tail, winter breed type dogs, Huskies, Malamutes, stuff like that. And so I started to do research on Japanese Akita breeders, because I said, you know what, it'll be like having Cookie still, but not, because it's a different type of dog, even though it looks like a giant version of her. So we started doing the research, looking around, and I wound up stumbling upon somebody, I believe on Reddit, and they had told me that if you want a Japanese Akita, there's a guy named Ben, and Ben is the guy to go to. He is, without question, the #1 guy for Japanese Akitas in the U.S. and the breeding program. One thing led to another. I don't really remember how I got in contact with Ben. I think I just wound up finding his info through like different loopholes, and the guy messaged me, and I wound up speaking to Ben. And we talked for probably about 3.5, 4 hours about the breed, just about what to expect owning it. I really wanted to go into owning this dog, this type of breed, especially because they have a negative connotation of the type of breed. They could be aggressive and stubborn and all this stuff, which Kenji was definitely stubborn to all hell. Aggressive in scenarios, like if they're defensive and whatnot, but they need a strong leader to lead them. So I wanted to just know, going into this experience of owning a very dominant breed like this, what to expect. And after about 3.5 hours, Ben had stopped me on the phone, and he just said, listen, I want you to know, most people call me for dogs to find out when I'm breeding the next litter, when I'm doing XYZ. He's like, but you've literally just asked me about the breed, and that's all you care about. He's like, so for me, that's enough for me to want you to have one of my dogs. Because normally I would just tell people, if they start asking me, what's the price of the dog, instead of just questions about the breed, he's turned off and he doesn't want to deal with them, because he wants people that are going to be homes for the dogs, not just a fad. Because a lot of people buy dogs for fads, and because it looks like a cute fuzzy thing, and it winds up growing up to be this giant thing that you had no idea how much training and time was going to go into this dog. So he had told me about his girl Ginger, his dog Ginger, and his male that was a stud to a lot of different litters named Musashi. I think that was his name. I'm like 99% sure it was Musashi. It's been a couple of years, obviously. And so we started talking. This is probably late August at this point, mid to late August. And he had said, I would love for you to have one of my dogs. I think I'm going to breed Ginger in the next couple of months, so let's stay in touch. Ben and I spoke pretty regularly for the next couple of months. And then probably October-ish, November, we found out that Ginger was pregnant. I was super happy, super excited. I couldn't wait to get the dog and have this new companion that I could do life with. In December, I was actually at my buddy Greg Helton's house for a New Year's Eve party. But New Year's Eve, he sent us a picture of Ginger's big pregnant belly, me and a couple other people that were in the group. And he had said, the next couple of days she's going to be due. I'll send pictures and updates when the puppies are born. Super excited. Great. A couple days go by. He says Ginger gave birth to, I believe it was 5 puppies. I forget how many male or female, but I had wanted a female, again, to mimic Kenji in some ways. To mimic Cookie in some ways. Not Kenji, because Kenji wasn't around yet. And so he says, we're going to send updates about all the puppies, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. Great. The next day, no update came. Seemed weird. Later that evening, still no update. Seemed very strange. So I had messaged Ben. I just said, hey, I'm just so curious about, how the dogs are, blah, blah, blah. And he messaged me back early the next morning, and he had said the puppies, I think it was 4. It was a litter of 5. 4 of the puppies had passed, and he had 1 girl left. And he said, if you want her, she's all yours, but I want to focus on taking care of the puppy, of this puppy, and keeping her alive. I said, of course, please, do what you have to do, take care of everything. And the next day, he wound up messaging me and saying that she had passed away. So, to my understanding, that hit Ben very hard. We spoke very briefly after that, but he had said that he was very upset, obviously, that the puppies passed, but he was more so upset in another way that I wasn't going to be able to get one of his dogs because we had spoken so frequently and so enthusiastically about the incoming litter. He had mentioned that there was a woman named Carol in Texas that just had a litter a couple of weeks or whatever before, and there was another woman named Amber in Minnesota who had a litter. Carol had all brindle puppies, so they were black with the white stripes. I didn't really want a brindle dog. I wanted to have a red dog, red Akita, to mimic Cookie, so this way the coloring was very similar. So I wound up speaking to Amber, and Amber and I spoke for a prolonged period of time. It was one of her first litters. It was her first litter under the Akita breed, and she was in the program under Ben. And Ben had said, they had both had litters, but I can't guarantee that they'll give you a dog or they'll offer you a puppy to buy. But let me just put word in and see what happens. Amber was unbelievable. She had said I had a 20-person wait list or whatnot, and actually a recommendation from Ben would put you in this litter if you really wanted a dog. And it took me a couple to really decide. It was a couple of weeks. I know she was really waiting for me to give her an answer. She had said that she was reserving one for me if I wanted one. This is now January. And I was kind of deciding. It was like, was it a bad juju that the puppies passed and maybe I shouldn't get a dog right now? And I was kind of going back and forth with my mom. We were talking about if there was a more deeper spiritual meaning to the thing and whatnot, and just trying to decide if the dog was going to be something that was the right move and choice. So now we're in February of 2020. I decided to pull forward with purchasing one of her puppies. Now, the way that Amber did this was she chose the puppies for you. So as opposed to you just seeing a puppy and going, hey, I want that dog, you explain your lifestyle, you explain everything to Amber, and then after that, she would recommend which dog and tell you this is the puppy that you're getting, whether it was brindle, red, whatnot. You could have preferences, but she wanted to see how the puppies developed based on their development, based on how they acted in the litter with each other and whatnot, which home based on how the puppy's going to be living, if there's kids, if there's other dogs, if they're traveling a lot, if they're going to be out of the house. She wanted to keep it like that. Now, one of the cool things that Amber did was she had puppy cams. So she had all these cameras that would watch the puppies 24/7. So you could check in, you could see them all sleeping, you could check in, see mom with them wrestling around with each other, feeding time, whatnot. And then she was doing a ton of updates on her social media account. So it was so exciting to watch. But now you don't know which dog is yours. One day I'm watching the feed, and I see this dog with a white ring around his neck, and he forklifted all the dogs out of the way to get to the food bowl. He was still a little puppy. And I texted Amber, I said, I'm watching the puppy cam, and I know I wanted a girl. I put it down on my application that I wanted a girl. I said, I don't know if this is a male or a female, but what about this dog with the ring around its neck? Is that a male or female? I like this dude, like this little thing. Forklifted everything. That's like me. I'm always hungry. I'm trying to get food. And so she had said that's a male. The way that she did the litter, I got to tie it into this. His name was Bladder before I named him Kenji. And the way that she did the litter was she used a stud from California. So Kenji's father was in California. His name was Maru. And Amber, my breeder, had his mother, and that's who she owned. And this was Yuna, Kenji's mom's first litter as a breeding in the breeding program. And Amber always said she didn't want to overbreed Yuna. She only wanted to do like a couple of litters, maybe 3, 4, whatever it was, litters, and then stop because she didn't want to put too much stress. She wanted to make sure the lines were clean and all this stuff. So she's a very responsible breeder. I give so much credit to Amber. She's an unbelievable soul, and we have spoken sometimes more than my own family members throughout the process of owning Kenji and just in general. But she brought Yuna out to California to meet Maru, used him as a stud, and so when the puppies were born, she gave each puppy a nickname from California. So Kenji was Bel Air, which was fitting because he wound up being a very expensive dog. So I wind up landing on Kenji, She says that's totally fine. Actually, his personality would probably line up with yours with how I've been watching him develop. And so now I'm one of the only owners out of, I believe that was a litter of 8, right? It was a litter of 8. I'm one of the only owners that knows which dog he's getting, and I'm watching him on the cameras. I'm laughing. He's like a little hellraiser, and just everything about him is just screams like, I can't wait to get you and just for us to be together. Cue the Arnold Classic in 2020. There's a secret virus going around. People are getting sick. Nobody knows what's going on. But the same weekend that the Arnold Classic is, I'm set to go pick up Kenji. Now, I rented a car back in New York, and my mom wanted to take the trip with me to drive out to Minnesota. I didn't want to put Kenji on a plane. I wanted to go pick him up. I didn't want to stress him out in the cargo hold. I wanted to make sure that he was okay. And I would have rather have driven all the way there and pick him up versus having to have him stressed out on the plane. So my mom and I formulated the plan that I was going out to the Arnold to shoot for Betancourt Nutrition, and that I would rent a car the day before. I'd give it to my mom. My mom and her friend Susan would drive out to me. That was on Thursday. They would drive out to me on Saturday all day. They'd get there Saturday night. They'd stay in my room, and then we'd leave from Columbus, Ohio, and drive to St. Paul, Minnesota to go meet and pick up Kenji. It's crazy. Looking back at it, the journey was long. It was a wild little ride, but we got out to St. Paul, I think in like 15 to 18 hours. We wound up going to the house. Amber had Kenji just come out by himself with his mom, and we got to meet him, all the puppies, his siblings, and it was amazing. It was like exactly how you envision meeting your new best friend, and just a little bonding session with just him and I. She didn't want to have all the other puppies there. She wanted to just like let me and him get used to each other. And it was awesome. I mean, I just felt like this is my guy right out the gate. The next day, we picked him up early in the morning, and we drove home. As we're driving home, COVID is becoming COVID in terms of like news articles, stories, and whatnot. And we wound up doing the 23 and a half hours straight from St. Paul, Minnesota, right back to Long Island home. And it was a long ride. Pennsylvania fucking sucks. That place, how long and boring and monotonous that road is to get through Pennsylvania west to east was horrific. And I just remember my mom telling me, just keep tapping the back of her head so this way she'd stay awake while we were driving through, because it was super early in the morning. It was like 3, 4 a.m. Actually, no, it was probably like 1 to 3 a.m. by the time we got it, because we wound up getting home at 7 a.m. It was a shit show, but Kenji was great. He cried maybe the first 10 minutes in the car, and then he was super cool. And then I'd go out to pump gas, and he'd jump on the window to like try to get to me. So our bond really did form very early. So over the course of COVID, obviously being locked down and dealing with all the that stuff, it was tough. It was tough raising a puppy. It was tough financially, because I went from the highest of highs in my career to now the lowest of lows, and my monthly retainers going to a big fat goose egg zero, because nobody knew what was going on. They didn't know if the world was shutting down. They didn't know if anything, finances would ever come back. Like there was so much uncertainty in the world. I don't have to harp on COVID as a whole, but holy shit, that fucked everybody up just mentally. And that goes for people that were like super hyper vigilant on not getting around other people, and people that didn't care about it and were all over the place. It didn't matter. It was stressful for everybody, and what a time. And there were a lot of people that bought dogs during COVID. They bought dogs because they were COVID dogs. They were stuck at home. They wanted to have a puppy and all this stuff. So now you have a lot of dogs that are in that 5 to 6 age group that were purchased because everybody was stuck home. I'm looking at my notes, just seeing, COVID with a new puppy, it was difficult. We did a couple of training sessions over at the training spot in Deer Park, Maximum Canine. They were great. Doing corrections on Kenji. He's a strong breed, so you have to remind yourself that you have to like really be firm with them sometimes. So it was tough. I'd leave, my mom would be in charge, and she'd be a little softer on him, and then I'd get him back, and he'd have a little bit of those softer tendencies and habits baked in a little bit. So I'd have to retrain and rebake those out. And it's nothing against my mom. I mean, he's a cute little puppy. I'm not going to lie. You guys know, you've seen him, and he's adorable. So it could be hard to discipline such a cute little thing. So COVID leaves, and now we're talking, that was 2020. 2022, I decide to get my first apartment. But right before I get my first apartment, there was a little health scare with Kenji. I was going to Salt Lake City to go film for Kai Green, and it was about 11 o'clock, maybe midnight, and Kenji's about is he 2 now? He's 2 at this point. Yeah. So Kenji's 2. Yes, he's 2. Maybe a little over 2. And so I'm brushing my teeth. I just packed my bags, and Kenji was playing with a bone in the hallway, and he starts to have trouble standing up. And I see him fumbling all over the place, and I get nervous because my mom lives in an upstairs condo, and there are stairs right there. So I go out. I go, what's going on with the dog? What's wrong? And I'm freaking out a little bit. And so my mom comes running out. She winds up like looking. He throws up everywhere. He can't stand up, and he starts shaking. And that was the first time in our relationship that my nerves went through the roof. Adrenaline dump. I said to my mom, I said, I have to get him to an emergency vet. And I scooped him up, no shoes on. I was in my underwear. Scooped him up. I put him on my shoulder. I ran down the stairs. I threw him in the backseat of my truck, and I took off. Now, luckily, we lived across the street from an emergency vet. I must have been doing 140, 120 down the service road to just get him there. And I turn around, and I'm crying my eyes out because I think the dog is dying. And I look, and he's having a full-blown, now what I know is a seizure. And he's shaking, and his paws are stiff, and it was really hard to see the dog that you love having a medical emergency like that. And if you have a dog, you definitely understand that it hurts. Even if you have a human that you care for that has a medical emergency in front of you, it's very difficult to watch. Fight or flight takes over. So although you're upset, crying, and whatnot, your senses are hyper vigilant. And so my mom pulls up in the car after me because I got to the emergency vet before her, and I'm banging on the glass door, and they were doing construction there. And I guess it looked as though they were closed. So now I turn around, I look at Kenji. He's in the back seat. Eyes are basically rolled, and he's just totally stiff as a board, drooling everywhere. And my mom pulls up, and I look at her, and I go, I got to get him to Farmingdale, which is another vet. And for those that don't know Long Island geography, that was probably another 15 minutes away, 10 to 15, if you're driving the normal speed limit. And I don't condone, obviously, to go over the speed limit. However, in an emergency situation, you kind of have to do some crazy shit sometimes. So I later found out that this vet was open, but they were around the back. So I could have had him see emergency services quicker if I had just gone around the back. The front was closed. To me, I don't know how they don't have cameras and see me freaking out, banging on the glass, but it is what it is. So I shut the door on Kenji in the back seat. I get back in my truck. And again, I'm doing about 150, 160 down one of the main roads in Long Island that goes north to south, from the North Shore to the South Shore, Route 110. And I'm driving, and I'm flashing my hazards, and I'm beeping at every stop sign, every red light, I'll slow down for a second just to get through and make sure everybody knows that it actually is an emergency, and I'm not trying to just be an asshole on the road. And I wound up, and everybody was super nice about it, thankfully. I mean, I'm sure they were scared seeing me barrel down the road at that speed, but it wound up getting me there. And I just remember pulling into the lot, barely putting it in park, getting Kenji out of the back seat, picking him up, and just walking in and just not knowing what to do and just saying, help, I need help. So they take him in. I'm at a loss for words. I don't really know what to say at that point. And they essentially tell me they kept him for a while. My mom and I left after being there for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. They basically tell me that it was a choking incident on whatever he was eating at the time, and that I shouldn't be concerned. But now having the vast knowledge of epilepsy that I have. Anybody with a brain could know that that was um, the end of a seizure. So we wound up having him monitored all morning. He wound up coming home and he was fine, just very tired and quiet. They did an X-ray. They did all that stuff, which, if you know epilepsy, idiopathic epilepsy to be specific, it doesn't actually do anything, the X-ray portion, because there's nothing to see. You need an MRI in theory, but idiopathic epilepsy basically just means they don't know where the root cause of the epileptic seizures is coming from. Some of you may understand where I'm coming from when I say this, but I'm going to apologize for having to gather myself in and out. I knew that this was going to be a very difficult episode, and I knew that my own personal content the podcast, my own personal stuff, I knew that in my heart of heart, I couldn't continue doing it until I addressed everything that's gone on. And it's a very vulnerable episode for me to be sitting here crying in front of a camera. And I don't want anybody watching this to feel sorry for me. This is part of my healing process to let it all out. Because following me on social, you know how important Kenji was to me. So I feel that this is something I have to do. I don't want to do it, but I have to. So I go to Salt Lake City for Kai, and Kenji's with my mom. And he's fine. He has no problems. Doesn't have another episode. Thankfully. I come back from Salt Lake City, and it's time to look for an apartment. I find an apartment that I really liked in Huntington Village, which my studio is still on the same block from that first apartment. And we start to move in. I move all my stuff in. Everything's going well. I'm working with Monster Energy at the time and shooting content for them, UGC-style content for them. And life looks like it's on the up and up. And like I said, Kenji hasn't had another episode. So to me, I can breathe a little easier because I was very scared of what that was or if that was going to be a persistent issue. I go to Tom DeJulie's gym at the time. He was working out of a gym called Pump House in Garden City. I go train with him one morning. I'm already moved into my apartment. Kenji's been great at the house. He's been getting used to it. He loved looking out the windows of my first apartment because it was like all main floor windows that he could look out. And I come back. It's like 11 o'clock, 11:30. Kenji's all excited and happy to see me. I'm happy to see him as usual. And then he starts having trouble standing again. And I call my mom kind of in a little bit of a panic, but I'm also taking video of him for video proof and evidence to show the vet. And then he starts hypersalivating, which is one of the first signs of, well, it's actually not the first sign. It could be the second sign. The first sign would be him having issues with balance and mobility. And he winds up having hypersalivation. I then scoop him up, and I'm kind of freaking out again because I don't know what this is. And he wasn't eating anything, so it wasn't obviously a choking incident. And so I rush him to a vet, and I was going to bring him to my vet at the time, which was all the way in Bayshore, but both the vets were in surgery at the time. Getting the hiccups because of my nerves. Both the vets were in surgery at the time, So I wound up just bringing him to the closest vet that I could think of as I was bringing him towards it, which was like maybe 15 minutes away. And once again, I scoop him up out of the back. I bring him in. I start asking for help. People kind of like all the people that have their dogs and whatnot. They could see how distressed and upset I am. The doctor comes out and he just goes, "Oh, he's having a grand mal seizure." And I'm just like, "What do you mean he's having a seizure?" I'm very confused. We did all the vetting, all the health testing, all of this, that. I don't understand why this dog is having seizures. This is his second one now. And we wind up going in the back. The doctor gives him a shot of Valium, which is used to take them out of having a seizure. And so we wait it out. I'm crying on the floor with Kenji. And we're kind of just trying to decide what we're going to do next for the dog. They're recommending medications because this is his second one in a couple of weeks now. And I didn't want to put him on medicine. I really didn't. It's not that I'm anti-medicine. I'm just anti-putting the dog on shit for life right out the gate without us kind of trying to do our due diligence if there is another way. Long story short, he has a couple of more seizures over the next 4 months, and we decide to put him on Keppra. Keppra is considered one of the lighter anticonvulsant medicines that the dogs can take. There's phenobarbital, there is potassium bromide, there is, I'm forgetting one right now, but I'm forgetting it currently, but there's another one as well. Phenobarbital is kind of like the gold standard. It's very hard. It could be very hard on the liver. Obviously, any of these medicines are going to cause problems sometimes in the long run. You have to continually check liver values and all these different blood markers and make sure that the dog is healthy as they're continuing the medication throughout life. But in theory, dogs with epilepsy can live a very full, long, happy, healthy life. Maybe they have a seizure a couple times a year. Maybe they don't. But that kind of just is one of the tough parts about the epilepsy, is that it can pop up at any time. And I think that's where a lot of deep-rooted stress, and I hate to use the word because it's so overused in a lot of ways, but a lot of the deep-rooted trauma that I've had from this has been he makes a noise that's a little bit off, and you're jumping up like, what's going on? Do I have to rush to the hospital? Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And it can be a very challenging thing to live with on a daily basis. The Keppra was an extended release, so he would take it twice a day, every 12 hours. At first, he started with 2 pills. He still was having seizures, so we gave him 3 pills, 3 in the morning, 3 at night. And it was 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., which started as now the new bookshelf, the bookends, I should say, of my day. Things were going okay. Kenji was always on a raw diet. I have to give the disclaimer that I'm not a veterinarian and I've never had any type of veterinarian classes on nutrition, medicines, anything like that. But Kenji was fed raw from when he was a puppy and he always did great with it. I tried giving him kibble a couple of times. His stool was horrific. His stomach would get crazy. And it wasn't a good situation. So I kept him on raw. He did really well with the raw, but Kenji was always a picky eater. And with medicines like these, you have to eat. He's got to be able to get the food down because otherwise they just wreak havoc on the stomach, make him nauseous, and he'll just throw everything up. So now, let's fast forward a couple of years now. I start jiu-jitsu. I meet a couple of guys from jiu-jitsu that are vets that are good friends of mine. And this is within the last year, I would say, year and a half. And because Kenji is still having seizures, one of them recommends that I put him on potassium bromide because he has seen very great results with potassium bromide on epileptic dogs. And he knows, well, he doesn't know because you can't guarantee anything, but he believes that it will help Kenji a lot. We put Kenji on the potassium bromide. It's a little bit of a rough transitionary period. He has one baby seizure a couple of weeks after we started that medicine, but then he was good for almost a year and a half. And what a blessing that was. I mean, if you have an epileptic dog, you understand any duration that they don't have a seizure is like a godsend. And being able to breathe a little easier is just such an unbelievable feeling in times of unknown and not knowing what comes next. I've always liked to know where I'm headed, certainty with clients, with life. I know life is uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen. Anything can happen at any given moment. But I like knowing that XYZ is happening next month. I'm working with these clients on retainer. We're doing these projects in the next couple of months. Our family's going here on I just like knowing what's coming. I hate not knowing what's happening next. And unfortunately in life, for me, that's probably been one of my life lessons of you don't always have control over everything and you don't always know what's going to happen next. So sometimes you have to roll with the punches and you have to just adapt. So I move into a new apartment. There are steeper stairs. This is within the last year. There are steeper stairs there. Kenji's doing okay with the stairs, but because of the epilepsy medicine, it did change his personality. He definitely wasn't the happy-go-lucky puppy that he always was. He had a great temperament, great attitude. Like if he knew people that he saw, me, my mom, Tyler, like friends of mine, I'd bring him for the podcast, and you guys have seen him that have watched podcast episodes where he's been involved and his little head would pop up. It was like a generally sweet dog 99% of the time. But the medicine definitely put him on edge with certain things. He was definitely a little bit more testy with certain things. So I'd have to be a little bit more cautious and mindful of how he felt each day. But Kenji would, he started having issues where he would throw up bile, and he's had it since he was little. If he didn't eat in time by a certain time every day, and he had hunger pains, he would throw up bile, and then he wouldn't want to eat. But then it was a problem because he needed his pills every 12 hours. So it became challenging in that aspect to make sure that the dog was walked, fed, pilled by 8 a.m. So at the time I was going to OG a lot. I was doing the 6:15s because I'd leave my house by 5:30. 6:15, I'd work out by 6:15, get out by 7:15, drive from Lindenhurst back to Huntington, and then Lindenhurst back to Huntington would be, like about a half hour, 40 minutes, and I'd walk right in the door right about 7:50. I'd give him food, I'd pill him, and then I'd take him for a walk. But I stopped going to OG. I started doing more jujitsu. So I'd walk him in the mornings. Then he started not wanting to eat in the morning. He'd want to walk first, then eat. And the schedule kind of got a little crazy. But once again, we're on this high of not having a seizure for a year and a half. Now let's cue this past May, June. Because of Kenji's health stuff, I'm always very hyper fixated on everything that he's doing. I noticed that his pee is a little off. His stream isn't as strong, and he seems to be like taking a little longer to pee. Hindsight's 2020, obviously. You look back and you should have known. You should have, maybe brought him to the vet a little earlier. But you don't know. I did bring him to one of my buddies pretty quickly, asking him about it. He said it's probably stones. We wound up doing a sonogram on Kenji, and he did say that there were some stones in there. And he recommended switching his food from raw to the urinary kibble to help break up some of the stones. With the potassium bromide that Kenji was on, his diet is very sensitive to salt. So salt fluctuations in his diet can cause the medicine to not absorb properly with that specific medicine. And because that's the medicine that has been his gold standard for keeping him healthy right now, I didn't want to screw with anything. And because Kenji is so picky with eating, I didn't know that he was going to eat the kibble or not. Turns out, I give him some of the kibble. He starts eating a couple of pieces in the parking lot with me. So I'm like, okay, maybe this will work. I start giving him some of the kibble. He starts eating a little bit. Once again, though, his stool, and I'm giving him some raw and some kibble to try to just maybe cut down some of these stones that he has in his bladder and just kind of be able to transition him fully to kibble. But I'm noticing that his stool is horrible. He definitely has more of an upset stomach and this and that. Okay. About 2-3 weeks maybe into eating the kibble, he drops and has a seizure in front of me, breaking the 1.5-year streak, almost 1.5 years. It's probably like 1 year and 4 months. So that sucked to have to, it feels like the doomsday clock, to have to like reset that, days since last event, days since last seizure. I had apps on my phone, I had all that stuff, and it definitely sucked a lot to have to reset that. But after that, it was kind of break up the stones or potentially allow him to have seizures. So I put him back on the raw food. I brought him to my other buddy who's a vet. They did a little x-ray. They saw where the stones were. They were very oddly shaped stones. He did have a couple that were kind of coming into his urethra, into the canal of his penis. And so what he did was he used a catheter while Kenji was kind of doped up, and he pushed the stones back into his bladder because we were going to figure out what surgical intervention we were going to have to do. Sometimes they just do a bladder stone removal where they open up the bladder, they remove the stones, they suture them back up, and they call it a day. Sometimes they do more intensive surgeries if this is going to be a persistent issue, like a scrotal urethrotomy, where they would create an incision where Kenji's scrotum is and the stones would fall out going forward. So there was a lot of things that were kind of just going on. He was good after that procedure for a week or two. His pee was normal because he pushed all the stones back into his bladder. And so we were trying to figure out what we were going to do next. After about 2 weeks, I noticed that Kenji's pee was off again. So I brought him back to my buddy who's the vet. They were set to do the same procedure, and then we were going to finalize where he was going to get surgery that next couple of days. I leave him with my buddy. I come back up. He's in Amityville. I come back up to Huntington. For those that don't understand, it's about 40 minutes during midday traffic on Long Island. And I get a text that basically says he's totally blocked off from a stone now, and I either have to put this dog down on the table or we have to get him to emergency surgery today, which was not the text that I was anticipating to receive. So I called the surgeon, this doctor named Dr. Infernuzzo, who is part of the Animal Surgical Center over in Oceanside. He's the guy that you want to do this type of surgery. He does it all the time. He works with a lot of soft tissue on animals, and he's a board-certified surgeon, which is not as common as you would think for vets in that field. So I call them. I call their office. I said, hey, so-and-so gave me the recommendation for you guys. I know this is last minute. It's the end of the day. My dog he told me my dog has to have emergency surgery or he's not going to survive. I don't know what else to do. They said, the doctor said that you can definitely come in on an emergency basis, obviously, and he'll take a look at the dog. I rushed down from Huntington down to Amityville. I grabbed Kenji. He was coming out of the anesthesia, but he was still pretty screwed up. And Japanese Akitas actually are very sensitive to the anesthesia. So I'm always very cautious to let doctors know. He's only been under anesthesia twice. Once before for the first episode where they did x-rays for him that night. And then, of course, this procedure where Doc pushed the stones back into his bladder. And then I'm driving from Amityville to Oceanside in traffic and rush hour to get him seen by this surgeon to hopefully go into surgery that night. We pull up. They pull a gurney out for him. They put him on the gurney. We go in the back. My mom meets me there. And my mom and I are just crying. We're holding Kenji. We don't know what's going to happen. And so the doctor comes out and he just says, hey, I just want to let you know that if his kidneys are shutting down, we're going to have to put the dog down. And there came that uncertainty again of not knowing what was going to happen. While I've tried to be as predictable as possible with my dog and keep him as healthy as possible with all of his health challenges, which he was diagnosed with hypothyroidism the month before this incident. I really tried my hardest to constantly keep him as healthy as possible and always make sure he had his pill schedule. But here we are sitting in this back room in an animal hospital, not knowing what's going to happen next. So he had to do blood work and check his kidney levels, which thankfully they came back perfect at the time. And so he said, we can rush him into surgery. He said, I don't want to do the big procedure on him. What I would like to do is I would like to open the bladder, clear any of the obstructions in his urethra, open the bladder, take all the stones out, and call it a day. And in the next couple of years, we'll decide if this is a recurring issue with this dog, his quality of life with the epilepsy, and with this, what we would do. Essentially meaning, if he's a couple of years older at that point and his life isn't doing well and his quality of life isn't good, then we would put him down versus putting him through another surgery to clear his bladder out. So we go into the waiting room, and, you got that pit in your stomach. You don't really know what's going to happen. You have no answers. You have no control. You just have to accept that he's in the best hands possible, and that you could just say a little prayer and hope for the best. After about 15 minutes, one of the nurses comes out, and she just says, can you follow me? The doctor wants to talk to you. Which everybody that has seen any ER drama, they know that that's usually not a good sign. And so I went in the back, and Kenji's on the table, and he's showing me in the camera the one stone that is completely blocked off Kenji. And even though he has better tools than the last vet, he said, I can't get this stone to move. They pumped him full of saline. He said, hopefully your good juju, being next to the dog, will maybe get the stone to budge, and it'll be a better situation. Whatever we can do, maybe just like the powers that be just are on our side right now, but I just want you here while I try once more to push this stone through. And he couldn't push it through, so he said, we're going to have to do, if I want to save the dog's life, we're going to have to do the emergency surgery of the scrotal ureterotomy, where they neuter Kenji, cause the incision in his scrotum, reroute his urethra to the scrotum, and basically clamp off his penis so he can't use it anymore because he'll just go to the bathroom out of there, and then going forward, any stones will just fall out the backside. Once again, a vet that doesn't do this surgery, from what I was told by my vet friends, a vet that doesn't do this surgery that often, you don't really want working on it. You want a guy like Infernuzo who is the guy to do that surgery and does it all the time or multiple times a week. So I said, just do whatever you can to save my buddy. My mom, my aunt, and I went out to dinner while Kenji was getting the larger operation, just because we wanted to leave just for a few, because it wouldn't have mattered. He was going to be in their hands for the time. And we wanted to just kind of get out of Dodge for a second and reset. And I just remember sitting at the bar and just really not having any words. Just sitting there kind of in quiet. We ordered some food. I couldn't really eat. And I was kind of waiting for a negative phone call or some type of bad news that they would tell me that the dog had an issue, or he passed on the table, or I was kind of just preemptively, mentally, just preparing myself for that type of fate. But the surgery was a success. He was out of surgery, thankfully, at the time. And he was in recovery. And they said, you guys can go home. We're going to watch him overnight. I made sure that they knew he's got to eat. I left him food. I told him his pill schedule. I said, he's got to take his epilepsy medicine, please. I haven't missed a dose since he started any of the medicines. I need him to make sure he doesn't have a seizure, another one. And they all agreed. They gave me updates that night. This is on a Thursday night. This is July 30th, I think. Yeah, it's either August 1st or July 30th. They give me updates that night. And then the next morning, they gave me an update saying that he was up. He was eating a little bit, but obviously very weak from the surgery and the double anesthesias that he had the day before. So I'm set. It's Friday. Yes, so it's August 1st. I'm set to pick him up later in the evening, the afternoon, and bring him home. They're giving me an idea of what to expect. His backside is all bloody because they basically created a new area for him to urinate out of. And they said he's going to pee a lot of clots and all this stuff. And so you have to just not touch his backside. You don't want it covered. He can't lick it. He's got to wear the cone. If he licks it, he could cause a huge infection, all this stuff. So it was stressful, to say the least. But I wound up getting him. He was very out of it, a little crying, little whiny, which is to be expected. His whole bottom side was bruised, and he had not only been neutered, but he had massive surgery. And so I got him home. I put him on his bed. He fell over when we were outside. He wanted to pee, and I just let him go, and he just kind of toppled over after he peed because he was still pretty weak. And I got him upstairs, and he was doing a bit of crying, and a couple of friends came by to just see how he was. My mom came by to stay because I had a large shoot the next morning for Frequency. They were opening their gym, and so I wanted to make sure that I was rested and ready for that. So my mom was over to help me take care of him. And he wasn't really eating. He was drinking a little bit, maybe wetting his tongue, but he was kind of just mostly standing over the water and just kind of like very dazed and shaking left and right, swaying, I should say. So the next morning, I mean, it was a rough night. He was crying a lot. He was up and down, barely got any sleep. I had to be at Frequency by like 4:35 in the morning. I left. I went. I shot all day. My mom wound up watching Kenji, and then I came home. And I had a friend come by, and we were hanging out and just watching him, and I was a little bit hyper vigilant like I always am. It's Saturday night now, and I tried cooking him a steak. He wasn't interested. I tried making him any type of food. He wasn't interested, but I was still giving him his pills every 12 hours because he needed the seizure pills no matter what. Then Sunday I woke up, and I apologize if I apologize if the story becomes increasingly more difficult for me from here on. I woke up a Sunday, and he was just, he was out of it. He was really out of it. I mean, you could snap in his face and wave your hand in front of his face, and he wasn't there. So I called the surgeon. I'm calling him. I'm speaking to a couple of friends of mine that are in the medical field for dogs, the veterinarian field. And everybody kind of says he probably needs some fluids because he hasn't eaten. So I bring him to an emergency room in Comac. But before then, I want to just preface and say how important it is to be physically fit to an extent. Now, I've gained weight over the last 6 to 7 months of just like lack of training in certain areas, stress from the dog, stress from just life. So I haven't been training or eating as cleanly as I should have been this entire time. But ebbs and flows of fitness. We have high points and we have low points. Being physically fit because you don't know what life is going to throw at you, where you need to be readily available to lift things up or move or run or vault over something. I'm just giving examples. Tom DeJulie is one of my very close friends. He's basically family. He's done the podcast a lot with me, and he's just an amazing human being. He is the one who introduced me to sandbag training. And because of him, I had picked up a lot of sandbags over the course of knowing him. If I hadn't had that training, I would not have been able to pick up Kenji that Sunday morning, because he couldn't walk still. And the night before, he had wanted to go outside, so I'd scooped him up, sandbag carry. I can't touch his backside, so I'm like kind of holding him like this, going down 2 flights of stairs, putting him on the lawn, letting him pee, which he started doing really well by himself. And then picking him back up, bringing him upstairs, and then putting him back in his bed. But without that training, I would not have been able to scoop him up, brace, and been able to do that. So I heed a warning of caution to everybody that they should always be physically fit and ready, because you truly don't know what's going to happen, where you need to be able to pick things up, move, XYZ. So after talking to the surgeon and everybody on the phone, we all decided that the ER was the best route for Kenji. So once again, I prepare my car. I pick him up and I throw him basically over my shoulder. And I bring him downstairs. First flight of stairs, fine. Second flight of stairs. And just as I had done about, let's say, give or take 7 to 8 hours prior, I put him on the grass to see if maybe he has to pee. And he totally collapses over. I hadn't seen a sight like that with him since when he had a seizure at my office one day, my old office in Roslyn, and I brought him to one of the vets nearby and I put him on the ground, and he totally keeled over. So that was hard to watch. And when I walk into my apartment, I think about that every time I look at that patch of grass. So I'm trying, man, I'm trying to get over that and heal, essentially. It takes time, I know. So after he fell over, I picked him up, sandbag again, and I put him in the back of my truck. And then I drove over to the ER. I'm talking to the surgeon just about how he is, what he's doing. And we get to the ER. I preemptively called them so they would have a stretcher ready for him. Because at the time, he was about 105, 107 pounds. He's a big boy. And so they come out, they put him on the stretcher. They start asking me questions about his gums, him, how he's been, what he had done. I go over everything with them. And then they bring him into the back. You know, my mom and I are upset at the time. It's been very hard. And so we're staying with him. My mom's staying with him a lot. I'm kind of outside just taking everything in because whether I wanted to admit it at the time or not, I knew that I was probably going to have to say goodbye. So they were giving him fluids and they were doing blood work to try to just figure out what was going on. Was it an infection? Was it because of his loss of fluids? And they couldn't really figure out what was going on with him. They didn't know. They said his sodium levels are a little high, but we can't explain why he cognitively isn't really there right now. And so they kept hydrating him. Every now and then he would have like a moment where he would kind of just like flinch up and like tense up, but he would like be a little bit more aware, and then he would go back down to him laying there kind of not in a complete vegetative state, but just more so just not really there. And time is going by over the day. The surgeon keeps talking to them, to me. I'm now involving my other friends who are vets and bouncing things off of my other friends that are ER techs for vets. And nobody really has an answer. There's a lot of floating hypotheses, but there's nothing that is concrete evidence of why Kenji is essentially dying. The option was, at this point, the ER vet was kind of negative on the outlook of Kenji, whereas everybody else was kind of positive, especially the surgeon, saying, if you get him to me tomorrow, I'll be able to hydrate him and figure out what's going on and this and that and XYZ. You know, and I'm on the phone with Kenji's breeder and we're crying. And we're just trying to figure out what's going on with him because we didn't know. And so the ER vet gave me the option. You either put him down, or he'll stay the night, and we'll hydrate him, and we'll keep giving him fluids and checking his blood work and seeing if things get better. My mom and I left midday to just take a breather, and you know he was in great hands. They were an amazing vet. They really were. Shout out to VEG, Veterinary Emergency Group in Comac. They were awesome. They really helped with a very hard time. And so we came back later that evening, and Kenji was worse. He was having labored breathing, and he he wasn't doing well. So my surgeon at the time was still saying that he could help him if we get him to him the next day. Just keep him there. My breeder is telling me, I trust whatever decision you make. I have a lot of friends messaging me telling me that they trust that Kenji's going to pull through and everything's going to be fine. And looking at Kenji, I kind of came to terms mentally that this was it. That although I tried my hardest to always be there for him and keep him healthy and help him and give him the best opportunity at a long, healthy life after we had some of these health issues, I just knew that his life was probably going to come to an end by the end of the day. And it was tough. I had to stay outside for a little while because I couldn't see him like that anymore. And I just, I couldn't make a decision at the time. It hurt too much. I called a couple of friends for just some strength in a really tough time. And that's what friends are for, man. They're there for when life is really tough and you're getting kicked while you're down. They're there to just lend a hand to pick you up and help you out. So the ER vet said, all of the vets that you're talking to that are trying to put their brains together and figure it out, I felt like I had the Avengers working on Kenji's case. All of these vets only understand what's going on with him at the surface level and his numbers. They don't know what he looks like right now. She said, please send them a video. So we sent all of my friends, the surgeon, a video of what Kenji looked like. And all of them said it was time to say goodbye. So I went outside. I called Jamal. Because I just said, hey, man, I just need some strength. Oh, man. And I called my boy Barra and Tyler, my buddy Gabe. Everybody offered to come and help me say goodbye. My buddy Barra came through. I told everybody else they didn't need to. And so we made the very difficult decision to put him down. His body was just, his body was failing him. And his organs were probably shutting down. So it was time. And I miss him. It's been 4 months. What is it, August 30 he was put down. September, October, November, December. So it'll be 5 months next month. And it hurts like it was yesterday. And I pick up one of his toys in my house. I'm sorry if I start sniffling. I didn't bring tissues like I probably should have. And I picked up one of his toys in my house the other day. And I squeaked it, and I hadn't heard this squeaker for the first time. I heard that squeaker for the first time since he was put down, and it sent like a shotgun through my chest. I had to sit down. Words can't describe this feeling unless you have a dog or you've been through this to some extent. I don't wish it on anybody. Having to say goodbye to your best friend, somebody that you was with you every single day, and you lived your life for. I made sure his pill schedule was always the first priority in my life. If I had to travel for work, anything I had to do, I made sure that I gave him the best option at life. And my breeder and I, sorry, my eye's twitching now. Amber and I still keep in touch, and I never want to not keep in touch with her. She's amazing. Unfortunately, Kenji's father seems like his line was the problem, and couple of the other puppies in the litter have had health issues. One of his sisters passed away a few weeks before him. So, it just hurts because I always thought in the back of my mind that the epilepsy is what would have taken him out, but I didn't expect it to be this and his body to just kind of not bounce back or heal. It's been a very difficult process. I have his urn at home. We cremated him. Saying goodbye was really hard. Obviously. It wasn't easy. I was very fortunate to have my best friend, Chris Barra, in the room with me, with my mom, to help us say goodbye. Because I just needed that little extra strength to make the decision and help me. Because I don't care how strong somebody is, when you got to make that decision, sometimes you just need a little guidance and help from your people. And I was very, very fortunate that Chris was there for me. He loved Kenji too. He was there since Kenji was a puppy, essentially. Same with Tyler. And it was just one of the worst days I've had to experience. And obviously there is still a lot of deep-rooted trauma and stress and things that I have to work out. But this does help because I had a lot of people ask what happened to Kenji. And like I said earlier in this video, I haven't had the heart to talk about it at scale. I just kind of told most people what happened. They didn't really know about Kenji's health issues that he had suffered from all the years that I've had him. And I want to make an important footnote at the end of this video. I want people to understand that when you get a dog, it's a lifelong commitment. I did have the opportunity to send Kenji back when he had his seizures. My breeder offered to take him back if I wanted to, and I declined. I just knew that I would always be thinking of him, and he was my guy. I made a lifelong commitment when I said, this is my dog. Everybody gets dogs sometimes. Well, not everybody, but people get dogs sometimes, and they see the wagging tail and everything is great and this and that. What happens when that dog gets sick, though? Are you going to be there for that dog? You have to think about these things before you make this lifelong commitment. You are this dog's entire world. You can't give up on them. And if you do, I'm not going to say I judge you, but it's a real shitty thing. It's a shitty thing for that dog to be put in that predicament and situation, that the person that they most care for isn't there for them at the times when they need them most. It really is like having a kid at times. I know people with kids hate when people that with dogs compare that, but it really is. In a lot of ways, it is like having a kid. Especially with Kenji, it was like having a special needs kid with the pill schedule and all of his little ailments that I had to make sure were like taken care of and healthy. But saying goodbye was truly the closing of a chapter in my life. It was just the closing of a chapter in my life for just a lot of things. He was there for my first apartment. He was there for a lot of ups and downs in business and life as a whole. And it feels weird that he's not there anymore. I have some of his ashes in this little round necklace. So I do feel like in some ways he is still with me. Even though he isn't. And going forward, I want to help educate people on epilepsy in animals, especially in dogs. It is a very scary thing to have to navigate. And if you've never experienced it before, having a dog drop and have a full-blown seizure in front of you is traumatic. I don't care what anybody says. It is very difficult to watch. There are more dogs with epilepsy than you would probably know, and it's scary. And it comes from bad lines of breeding. It comes from inbreeding at later, earlier in the breeding lines. There's a lot of things that can cause that. And once again, idiopathic epilepsy, there's no cure for it. It's just medicated and treated as it comes. And it is a very, very scary thing to go through. But over the next couple of months to years, I'd like to create something to help people and give them the resources and knowledge that they need if this is their first time experiencing it. Because, like I said, it is fucking scary. There's no way around it. It just is. Life is a little less chaotic in terms of having to take care of a sick animal. So there are pros in that sense. I don't want to seem like it's a pro that I don't have my friend. One of the examples that I've given people that I know is, you look forward to a day where you're not going to have the pill schedules and the stress of a potential seizure or all these different things and the medications and all this stuff. And then it comes, and then it's just like, at what cost, though? I lost my best friend. So in that respect, there's a lot of relief, but he's not here. So would you go through all of that to keep your friend here? I probably would have. If it meant that he was stable but happy and not declining, I probably would. Not probably, I would. I can't even say probably. I would continue doing what I was doing to ensure that he was always taken care of. And that was my guy. I mean, you could see that this was very hard for me to talk about just right off the jump and just in general. I was going to start this video off with like a box of tissues hitting the desk because I knew this was going to be exceptionally difficult for me to talk about and be vulnerable on camera. But I think it's important. It's important in my healing process, it's important for other people to see. It's important for other people to know that they are not alone when they lose a dog, or I can't even say a dog, a family member like this, an animal that's a family member, that you're not alone when you feel this shitty and the lows and you really just, life just feels so different because it is. Your best friend isn't there anymore. Obviously, Kenji's in my podcast artwork, and I'm doing some rebranding to still incorporate him in things in different ways. But man, oh man, it was a roller coaster ride, and it still is, and it's still very hard. And I don't wish those experiences on anybody, but it is an important experience of life and learning and growing in as a whole. Whether Kenji lived another 10 years or another year, or he passed away at the same time or earlier, you have to accept that it was his time in some way. I feel robbed of the time that I didn't get with him because he was only 5.5 when he passed, and yesterday was his birthday, so he would have been 6. But sometimes you have to throw your hands up. If you believe in a higher power, if you believe in spirituality, the universe, and maybe not necessarily a God, or you do, you have to have some type of feeling that life happens to us. Life happens for us, not to us. It's a Tony Robbins quote. I hate to sound corny, but I have to remind myself of that daily, is that if certain opportunities don't pan out, if people phase out of your life, if you lose a loved one or an animal that's a family member, if you wind up shifting in business to do something else, or things aren't working out, or everything happens for us to align us to the next stages of life or to life as a whole, as opposed to us sitting there with a victim mentality saying, why me? And trust me, I had my why me moment. After we put him down that night and my buddy took me out for a beer and some food, and when I went home and my mom had cleared out all of his toys, but we kept his favorite ones and we donated the rest to shelters and whatnot, I cried till about 4 a.m. that night. Ugly cry, like wailing. That nobody prepares you for that first coming home and they're not there anymore. And it lasts a while. It doesn't just go away. It lasts a while. It hurts. It hurts. But I think I'm going to end it there before I start crying again. I just want to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart, reaching out, sending me artwork of Kenji. It's amazing. He was the best dog. Far better than I could have asked for. I love him. I always will love him. No, anybody asking, I'm not getting another dog. Not for a very long time if I ever do again. This was more than enough. to just make me want to focus on life, focus on myself, the business, just everything as a whole. But in remembrance of my boy, I wanted to make this video because, like I said, I couldn't in my heart of hearts continue on with my content, with the podcast, with everything, without first addressing the huge elephant in the room that was the loss of Kenji and how he departed. But I do want to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart for all the reaching out, for all the love, for everything. It was far more than I could have even imagined, and it definitely helped the healing process as I went through it in the days, weeks, and even now months later. So thank you guys. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, anything, please post it below. Once again, in its raw form, I'm going to post this. Really no editing, as most of my stuff is. I try to keep it as raw and real as possible. It's not easy to sit in front of a camera and ugly cry and talk about the loss of your best friend. But I think, like I said, for my own grieving process, for my own healing process, and for information for everybody else or other people that might be going through it that feel isolated and alone, you're not. This is unfortunately part of the journey when we pick up our pets. We sign the contract that we sign the day we pick up our pets is all of those days and years of amazing memories for the one worst day of our lives when we have to say goodbye. And there's no other way around it. You have to enjoy the time that you have with your pet, with your family, with your friends while you have it, because dogs and animals live in the now. And that's one thing that we can really take away from them is they're always down to ride. They're always down to be with you no matter what. They just want to love you and be with you. And they're not worried about tomorrow. They're not worried about the past. They're worried about right now. And truthfully, with my journaling and everything that I'm trying to do to stay in the now and appreciate time as I'm getting older, that's definitely one of the key takeaways for life moving forward, is to appreciate everything while you're doing it, while you're with people, while you're with pets, and just don't take anything for granted. On that note, I appreciate everybody for fucking with me. Come on, man. You can't get choked up at the exit. But for now, peace.
Alright, I'm mounting you. That's it. It's over for this puppy. I'm gonna jujitsu you. Love you.